Hello and welcome. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're watching the Mojo Story. We're in Ajmer on the road tracking the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. It's a rain-swept evening here in Rajasthan. But there's a very interesting non-COVID development brewing in the national capital. And, it's a big political story because after the abrogation of Article 370, which took away the special status of Jammu and Kashmir as well as its statehood. This is the first such meeting of its kind. Jammu and Kashmir leaders, 14 of them, meeting with the Prime Minister as well as the Home Minister. And looking at that photograph, who would believe that many of these mainstream leaders, especially from the Kashmir Valley, had been placed under a prolonged detention when the government decided to abrogate Article 370. Now, the Prime Minister has called for a Naya Kashmir. I want to just play those pictures once again because I'm particularly struck by how politely everybody's standing together and how you make sense of the fact that through much of the previous year, you actually had this very same, at least half of this room under arrest, right? Omar, Mehbooba, Sajad Loan, to name just a few. Farooq Abdullah under house arrest, others placed under formal detention. How do we sort of make sense of what's happening? Is this really a new beginning, or is it old wine in a new bottle, to use that infamous cliche? To make sense of this, let's introduce our panel of experts today, many of whom have either spent time in Jammu and Kashmir or have spent years of their life studying and reporting it, or of course are politicians themselves. General Hasnain, welcome to the program. He served as General Officer Commanding in the Kashmir Valley. We're also joined by Dr. Samir Kaul. Let's welcome him to the program, who's a leader with the National Conference, apart from being a doctor here in the national capital. Happymon Jacob, the author of a book on the line of control, and someone who has spent a long time looking in particular at India and Pakistan on a day when Mehbooba Mufti, who was at that meeting, has said, if India can talk to the Taliban, why can't it talk to Pakistan? Brigadier Gupta is, of course, a retired army officer, but he's also a spokesperson of the BJP. Tavleen Singh, senior journalist, who has spent many years reporting from and on Kashmir, and Suhail Bukhari, finally, once upon a time used to be a journalist, but is now with the PDP. So really, men and women of many different avatars here. Before I get the political perspectives, I'd actually like to start with Tavleen and General Hasnain, if I may. Tavleen, in some ways, people could say the government has had a rethink, but I actually look at it somewhat differently. Also, having spent much of my life reporting Kashmir, I feel that the government left the mainstream leaders with no option, that it has the mainstream leaders of Jammu and Kashmir exactly where the government wants them. They were jailed. Yes, there's been a Gupkar alliance, which has seen all of these Kashmir parties coming together. But these leaders have walked in enormously weakened, even as they've come together. Would you agree, or do you have a different perspective?
I have a different view on this. I think that they tried to defame these leaders. They called them the Gupkar gang. They said that they were corrupt and that they'd ruined Kashmir and all of that. And they had their own. They were trying to create a new kind of leader. In fact, I heard that from somebody quite close to the BJP, that what they wanted was to create a new generation of Kashmiri leaders. And that's why you have, what is it called, the Apni party or something like that. And I don't think that has worked. So they've actually had to turn to these guys because you have to, in the end, have a political solution. You cannot keep, jailing leaders and curfew and all that sort of business. And no amount of development is going to make up for the fact that you've actually taken away the status of Kashmir and turned it into a union territory. And I think a union territory that they haven't been able to govern very well yet. That's my
but of course the vilification of these leaders was completely needless, and it was enabled by a lot of jingoistic television channels. But that doesn't change the fact that even leaders they've supported in the past. Let's take a Sajad Loan, for example. Sajad Loan stood by Narendra Modi at a time when that, got him abuses in the Kashmir Valley. He was an ally of the BJP, and even he was detained, right? The Apni party that you talk about, the BJP did try and prop up an Altaf Bukhari. He's one of those who was an invitee at today's meeting. What I'm really trying to argue is, what is the negotiating power with which these Jammu and Kashmir politicians have entered that room today, Tavleen?
I think what they can negotiate is the restoration of the Jammu and Kashmir as a state. Do you know? I mean, I think that is their biggest weapon, because I think that they made a mistake when they abrogated Article 370 by reducing the status of Jammu and Kashmir to a union territory. I think the move to keep Ladakh as a separate union territory was a good one, because, as you know, the Ladakhis have been very unhappy in their relationship with Kashmir, so they're quite relieved. But to reduce Jammu and Kashmir to a union territory, I think, was a mistake, and I think that they're paying for that mistake. So what else can they negotiate? Article 370 is never going to be brought back. Even the Congress party is not asking for that.
Well, that was my point, and forgive me for being cynical, General Hasnain, but it almost seems to me that restoring statehood is low-hanging fruit for the government. It can do it at some point, appear like the more sort of generous, softer approach, as and when it's convenient, but not really restore back what is really of value to at least these mainstream parties from the Kashmir Valley, because other than Article 370, what is it that the mainstream parties had that they could sort of say was different from the separatists? What they would say is that the Indian constitution offered enough exceptionalism for Jammu and Kashmir. You take away that exceptionalism, how does the mainstream remain mainstream? This is my concern.
See, Barkha, a lot of questions in your one question itself. Let me start by saying 5th of August 2019 was a landmark day. It was something very different. It was a very, very bold approach, something which took us all by surprise that time. And it came down like a hammer. That was the strategy. That was probably the strategy, a hammer-like approach, and subsequent a bit of modification here and there. Go along, of course, in the middle, COVID has come, so it has upset a lot of things in the last 1 year. Otherwise, you may have seen some of these movements earlier. The situation today is that the geopolitical environment has created the opportunity, and the government has therefore grabbed it. And because of that, they have reached out, and I consider that this particular gesture at the moment is just a testing of waters. This is just to get everyone's viewpoint, some clarity on points of view of different political parties. We should not be looking at outcomes from this kind of a meeting at all. I don't think at the end of it there's going to be any outcome at all. You will have to have many more meetings for this. What the government very correctly, perhaps, and as a part of the strategy, what they did was that they took away the status of statehood. That was good, smart strategy. I mean, you got to give it to whoever is working on these things, to give it to them that the strategy was right. You got the statehood out, made it into a union territory, so that the first gesture which could ever be made at subsequent times would be the restoration of the statehood. And that is smart thinking. And the good, smart other thing which was there was that Jammu and Kashmir were not separated. They were kept together. And therefore, the original entity, you may not have Ladakh at all into it, the original entity of Jammu and Kashmir regions, coming back to statehood would be the first step to mollify, to send home some positive messages to the political parties, etc. And that could be the start point for the rebuilding of the political narratives all over. If you really look at it, Barkha, good things have happened in the last couple of months. The security situation completely under control, stable, Pakistan on the other side, also willing to do some back channel talks, etc. The geopolitical environment is conducive. In the middle of this, the only thing missing is a political color to the entire situation. That political color is being added now through the testing of waters. I'm not saying that this is going to lead to any outcomes immediately. This is going to take a fair amount of give and take, and that's how it should be.
But do you want to respond before I go to the others to Tavleen's point that the government tried to create a new polity? When I say create, I mean support, and that is not it's not peculiar to the BJP. Previous governments have also done sort of similar experiments. Whether it's taking away a faction of the Hurriyat conference or in A.S. Dullat's time, there was an attempt to talk directly to terror groups like the Hizbul Mujahideen. Tavleen's point is the government tried to create a new political alternative, vilify this particular set, failed at that attempt, and therefore has had to talk to the same people that it vilified. Is that how you see it?
I fully agree with what Tavleen Singh ji has said. There is no doubt that the government was looking for different players, some kind of different political narratives at that particular time. Jammu and Kashmir is an awkward place. It's not easy to go about doing this kind of a thing, even as you've got a conflict situation on your hands all the time. So that thing has not really worked out. Besides that, COVID has acted as a huge obstacle to that process itself. And that process not having succeeded, I think an attempt is being made to see what can best be made out with the existing political community which is there and how best we can take the situation forward.
Sameer Kaul, as a mainstream politician from Jammu and Kashmir, how do you see this entire conversation? Do you think that the mainstream, the Gupkar alliance, had any choice but to accept this invitation? What do you think is the leverage that the Gupkar alliance can still assert at a time when the government seems quite focused on moving ahead with the redrawing of constituencies that many people believe is going to change how politics is actually conducted and what the outcomes of elections might be? So your take, Dr. Kaul.
Thanks for having me on the show, Barkha. But an honest confession that we are living in a world where a hammer-like approach is something that is considered a step. Quite often I've seen that we get caught in the steps and forget the goal. The goal always has been to win the hearts and minds of the people of Jammu Kashmir, and not now Ladakh, earlier Ladakh as well. But we get caught in the steps as to how to go about it, whether to do a hammer-like approach or to do something with love. And we always tend to say that the UPA failed because they used love. They didn't do it and it didn't work, and therefore a hammer-like approach was required. But I just want to say we don't do lots of things properly. I'm not sure we did the love thing properly also. Like I'm not sure we did the creation of new generation of political leaders properly in our last attempt. So just to say that we didn't do things well doesn't actually mean that they don't work. Now, as the senior leader of Jammu and Kashmir, Farooq Abdullah, the president of the National Conference, I think it was his duty to collect all shades of mainstream opinion under an umbrella who obviously felt aggrieved. And I will have to a bit disagree with General Hasnain Saab when he says that all was well and the security situation was fine and the development was well on its way according to the promises made. Obviously, all was not well. There may be a surface calm, but I can.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, Sameer, we can't hear you suddenly. Is Sameer on mute? I can't hear Sameer.
Can you? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're
can
back.
You hear
yeah,
me
you're
now?
back. Yes,
can you hear
you're
me
back.
now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll have to just put a little bit of an objection to General Hasnain's assessment. Not an objection, just my point of view that perhaps
okay, Dr. Kaul,
when we say all was well ever since the article got abrogated, all is not well. Under the surface, every week there are killings of the most guarded people in the state, and not to talk about people who are unguarded, but no development there, no promises have been able to be kept, and there's been a one-way executive government in place who have tried. I can see them trying, but really nothing is materialized on the ground. So perhaps the government of India at some point of time felt it was time to restore a two-way process in the state, which was democratic. Because as we all know, there are internal dimensions to our problem. There are external dimensions as well. And
let me
those
let me just
cannot be ignored.
let me just
So
jump
you
in
have to
there.
look at
Let
the
me just
whole
jump.
thing.
Got it. And there are many external dimensions. General Hasnain mentioned Pakistan, but there's also Afghanistan. There's also the Americans pulling out of Afghanistan. There is the legitimization of the Taliban. There are all of these factors that play as well. Happymon, how much of that, the external dimension, is what you think determined the government's timing? Or do you think that there's been so much distraction with COVID that this is something that can be done kind of quietly without attracting the kind of attention and debate it once would have?
But I think several factors have led to this decision. I'm not even sort of talking about the domestic factors, as it were, in Jammu and Kashmir. But I think this is in many ways an opportune time for the government of India to be doing what it is doing. Vis-a-vis Pakistan, I think purely from a tactical point of view, India has, let's say, New Delhi has Pakistan where it wants at this point of time. Pakistan has been very insistent on the fact that unless and until India restores Article 370 and statehood in Jammu and Kashmir, it would not get into a conversation with India. I think Pakistan has moved back from that precondition. It is now willing to already got into a back-channel conversation with India on the 25th of February. We had a ceasefire agreement with Pakistan, and today there is an increasing, opinion in Pakistan that if there is a certain amount of calm and normal politics in Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan would be willing to get into a dialogue process with India. So to that extent, India has not really, led by the BJP government, has not really climbed down in many ways. What it has done is really to say that, hey, we are walking till the halfway mark and you go to sort of walk to the halfway mark. Now, this halfway mark that India is now identifying as where Pakistan should come is something that India has already said India would be arriving at a certain point of time, which is statehood. So by not returning Article 370 and perhaps returning the statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, India is asking Pakistan to sort of shed its previous hesitations about getting into a conversation. So I think vis-a-vis Pakistan, there is a clear, I think, understanding that India is perhaps, negotiating from a position of strength. And I think on the Pakistani side, clearly, as you correctly pointed out, Pakistan is also busy on the Afghan front. The Americans are withdrawing. They want to sort of consolidate their position in Kabul and elsewhere. And from the Indian point of view, clearly also that, you don't want a Taliban dispensation in Afghanistan, which is antithetical to the Indian interests. So in many ways, therefore, both the Afghan situation and the sort of thinking in Pakistan is conducive to the move that India has made. I mean, this is also in the wake of the larger strategic picture, which is the sort of Sino-Pakistan, coming together. In the wake of the 2019 decision, you saw for the first time in history, the Chinese started talking overtly about Kashmir. So we somehow willy-nilly brought the two sides together on the Kashmir question. So by, I think, reaching out to Kashmir, the government is therefore taking many of these external scenarios, in keeping many of these external scenarios in mind.
So that's very interesting. So to that extent, Mehbooba Mufti's statement, Happymon, that if you can talk to the Taliban, why not to Pakistan, will not generate the kind of heat it once would have.
I absolutely agree. I think she's making an absolutely interesting point by saying that people may not like what Mehbooba Mufti has said, because of who she is. She's a PDP politician, often called a soft separatist, that, this, and the other. But that's the reality. India cannot continue to have a peaceful reconciliation in Jammu and Kashmir without having Pakistan on board. However unpopular that opinion is, that's a reality. So if we can have the Pakistanis on board this negotiation process, and if the Kashmiri political parties are willing to live by the half measure, which is returning of statehood, I think India should continue this conversation with the political parties in Kashmir, as well as the Pakistanis on the other side.
So Happymon, what you and General Hasnain have pointed out in terms of external dimensions, as well as Sameer, makes perfect sense. But Brigadier Gupta, how do you explain the internal contradictions? How do you explain that these were people who were considered a threat to law and order in 2019 and today are considered legitimate politicians all over again? Or is the hope that nobody really remembers that this whole entire bunch or half of that room that's sitting with the Prime Minister today was actually jailed?
Barkha, if I may say, that's the beauty of Indian democracy. What we are seeing today is actually what Indian democracy is. Now, coming to J&K, you see the entire policy or the aim of the government for the J&K had been to ensure its full integration with India and bring an end to separatism and terrorism, and also to ensure that the aspirations of the people of all three regions are met and there is no dominance by one region about the other. That was the aim. And with that in mind, Article 370 and 35A were abrogated. Now, what happened post 5 August, you all know. And it was required at that time. It was required at that time because the Gupkar alliance, which was formed just before 5 August 2019, they had made their aim very clear. And left to them, they would have ensured that Kashmir is set on fire. But that was not wanted. We did not want bloodshed. We did not want riots on the streets. So therefore, as a precautionary measure, what was done, I believe, is right and should have been done and has been justified also. Not to say that all of a sudden, how have they come to prominence? See, we had the DDC elections. In the DDC elections, these parties got the mandate. Though they formed the alliance for a single purpose, that was to ensure that BJP does not get the overall majority. And the alliance failed just after the elections. People have been studying and reading all these things. I'm just coming from, I was in Srinagar yesterday. I came back today. I've been there, I've met people, I've talked to people. There was pressure on these leaders. The common man in Kashmir has accepted that post 5 August, there's going to be no change. There's going to be no reversal back to 370. They are looking forward to a better life. They are looking forward to a peaceful life. They are looking forward to be a part of development. They want that what development is taking place in the country should take place here also. They want employment. They want security. So therefore, there was no option left with these people. The Gupkar Alliance members had to go for this meeting. They could not avoid it because people in Kashmir wanted that. This was the popular public opinion which has forced them to join this meeting.
So let me take this to Tavleen and back to General Hasnain. It is actually a very interesting thing, Indian politics. The BJP and the PDP as coalition partners running a state together, then ending up being absolutely hostile to each other. Now the whispers that Mehbooba Mufti will be, in a way, what the Hurriyat once was to the politics of let's say the early 2000s, that she's the separatist or the soft separatist in quotes that you can do business with. For those of us who are sort of deep inside this story, there's no ending to the conspiracies. But the fact is, Tavleen, even today, at least for form's sake, Farooq Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti have gone into that meeting asking for 370 to be reinstated. That is the official position of the Gupkar Alliance. And the Gupkar Alliance in the last local elections together won over 100 seats to the BJP 75. So if it's about elections, do you think that these are parties just going through the motions of asking for 370, knowing fully well that it's never going to come back? I think we all know that. I think all of us sitting here know that it's never going to come back, not even if the central government changes tomorrow.
No, it can never come back. And to tell you the truth, it should have gone. Because it became, instead of becoming an enabling article for the laws of India to apply to Kashmir, which is what it started off as, because Kashmir was not at the Constituent Assembly, and this was going to be the enabling article. It became a barrier and made ordinary Kashmiris believe that independence or becoming part of Pakistan was always on the horizon. Now, you know, and General Saab will confirm this, everyone knew that was never going to happen. We cannot afford for Kashmir to become a separate country or become part of Pakistan, particularly now that we see the rise of the Taliban back in Afghanistan. We cannot afford a little, caliphate within the borders of India. I think that the BJP, if there'd been a bit of Vajpayee mixed into the way they handled this, we wouldn't have got here. I think they could have got all these leaders on board to slowly actually weaken that article and remove it in a better way. Vajpayee, if you remember, brought peace to Kashmir at a time when we thought it could never come. And he did it by being honest with the Kashmiris. I remember one of these leaders, militant leaders, saying to me, he said, इस अटल जी के साथ हम बात कर सकते हैं क्योंकि वो सच बोल रहे हैं. कांग्रेस ने हमारे साथ कभी सच नहीं बोला है. बिकॉज remember he made that statement saying कि मस्जिदों से अगर आप सियासत करोगे तो मंदिरों से भी होगी. And this is a militant leader who said we can talk to this man. Now, what I hope that they will do now is be honest with our own people. I don't think we should discuss Kashmir ever with Pakistan again. We should just say, go away, mind your own business. Really, it's not Pakistan's business anymore.
Well, that's very different from exactly what Happymon said, where he actually thinks that the reinstating of statehood gives Pakistan something to hold on to. Yes, Brigadier Gupta, I'm coming to you just after General Saab. General Hasnain, here's the question for you. Very interesting comment from Ram Madhav, who says that the very fact that this meeting that everybody thought was going to be some stilted photo op has actually gone on for over 3 hours points to the fact that something real happened in that room, even if it was a lot of venting and anger being expressed. I don't know, but something went on that something has gone on that is beyond a photo op, because who can just talk in a stilted way for over 3 hours?
See, Barkha, one thing is very clear. Whatever may be the political ideology of all these people who are sitting there, all of them are Indians. We have to remember they are all Indians, and they have never denied that fact that they are Indians. Some of them have made awkward statements for political mileage here and there once in a while, but they have never denied their Indianhood. If 3 hours, I would say they should be sitting for 7 to 8 to 10 hours, abusing each other at the end of it. That's what Indian politics is all about. Exactly what Brigadier Gupta was just telling you. But let me give you another aspect to this. The demand for revocation of Article 370, and now the aspect of reintroducing Article 370, is a maximalist demand. If I was sitting there, if I was from Kashmir, I would be absolutely making that demand. Because that is the demand which will be a negotiating tool and will act as the compromise. It will create the compromise that you are looking for, which is the return of statehood. That's the way the statehood will come. And to come back to the issue, I support Tavleen Singh's statement on the aspect of Pakistan. Mehbooba Mufti ji has unfortunately pursued or taken a wrong line in this whole thing. She still thinks that there is a political constituency which is favoring Pakistan, that they are sitting on the cusp, sitting on the hedge, and they are the ones who have always invariably voted perhaps for the PDP in the past, and that's the constituency that she will probably appeal to. But I think she's wrong this time, because the air is changing completely, and that's where I want to convey to my good friend Happymon. No, Pakistan is not relevant at the moment. Maybe at some stage in later years it could become back to relevance. It is not relevant at the moment. After 5th of August 2019, I think we must make it very clear that the 1994 resolution of the parliamentary two houses of parliament stands clear. The whole of Jammu and Kashmir belongs to India. And until the situation comes back completely to our favor, we have nothing to do with Pakistan on this. Back channel talks, etc. will continue. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, before Brigadier Gupta and Happymon and as Dr. Kaul respond, details are now emerging about this meeting. We have a statement from Altaf Bukhari, who was at the meeting, saying that the Prime Minister spoke to us about the delimitation process, that's the redrawing of the constituencies. He asked everybody to support it, to cooperate with it, and told us that after that, elections will be conducted. Now, we all know that the redrawing of these constituencies is the first step towards the holding of elections. Brigadier Gupta, go ahead, then Happymon, then Dr. Kaul. Brigadier Gupta, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Barkha, what I wanted to say was whether this meeting is the first of its kind or it's going to continue just the beginning will be decided by the stand taken by the Gupkar Alliance in this meeting today. And we're very clear in about half an hour. Now, 2 points have been raised. One is the relevance of Pakistan. I fully support what Tavleen ji and my friend Ata has said. Today's context, Pakistan has got no relevance in Jammu and Kashmir. And the only thing negotiable with Pakistan is the POJK and nothing else. The reference was also made of the Vajpayee era and something Vajpayee-like statesmanship in what has been done now. See, I would like to say that there's been a lot of change from the time of Vajpayee to this. Today, we are, before 2019, 5th of August, the terrorism had been overtaken by Islamization in Kashmir. That radicalization and Islamization had emerged as bigger threats, and we could not afford that. Therefore, some sort of firm action, what Atta refers to as the hammer action, was needed, and that was not taken by itself. It was with the consent of the parliament. Parliament is the supreme authority in India, and the parliament had voted for it, and thereafter the policy was implemented. So to say that it's been pushed around and some Bajpayee touch were lacking, I somehow will like to differ on that. Another thing I'd like to say, as far as statehood is concerned, it's a stated policy of the government. The government has said statehood would be restored, but at the appropriate time. And I think that statement still holds. The appropriate time has yet to come.
Okay, I want Dr. Kaul to talk about the first few comments that we've seen. Admittedly, it's not from the Gupkar alliance. I think they'll have to talk amongst themselves before they give a unified response. Happymon, to Tavleen and General Hasnain's point that Pakistan is not in this picture at all. Your comment. Can we unmute? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be very quick, Barkha. I mean, I see the rationale behind the arguments made by Tavleen ji and Atta Saab. My argument is not a moral one. I'm not making a moral argument when I say Pakistan has some negotiating position vis-a-vis Kashmir. I'm making a realistic argument. Now, tell me, in the last 30 years, name one prime minister who has not spoken to Pakistan on the Kashmir question, including Mr. Modi. All of these prime ministers, all of these dispensations, all of these governments have, through the back channel, through the front channel, through secret means, have spoken to Pakistan on the Kashmir question. What does that tell you? That tells you that the statecraft in New Delhi realizes that you can't really afford not to talk to Pakistan on the Kashmir question. I'm not simply saying that therefore carve out Kashmir, a piece of Kashmir, and give it to Pakistan. That's not my point at all. I'm simply making a realistic argument. And I think realpolitik requires a certain amount of statecraft of this kind.
Yeah, I think there's a point there, but I just want to read out another comment that has come from Altaf Bukhari, who has emerged from the meeting and has said that the Prime Minister also said we are committed to the restoration of statehood. So I think, as we all agreed in the beginning of the program, that was an olive branch that would be offered. Samir, Kaul, sorry, go ahead. Your reaction to that. The Gupkar alliance went in asking for the restoration of 370, perhaps knowing that that's not going to happen. The Prime Minister responded with saying there is a process, we will bring back statehood. General Hasnain would say that asking for 370 was the maximalist position. You negotiate from a point which you know you can't get, so you get something in the middle. Do go ahead, Dr. Kaul.
I can only comment for the National Conference because the People's Alliance Against Gupkar Declaration has its own spokesperson, and that is Tariq Ami Sahab, and in due course of time, he's going to come out and talk to all of you. And as far as I remember, Altaf Bukhari was never part of the Gupkar Alliance. So maybe he may be a co-optee now, but we don't know. We'll have to wait for that. He's not part, and he shouldn't be speaking for the Gupkar Alliance. And I think they will come out in due course of time. They'll come out with their point of view, and we'll all get to hear.
Yeah. I wasn't saying Altaf was speaking for the Gupkar alliance. I was just quoting him on what happened in the meeting. I'm just wondering your comments as a national conference leader on the comment by the Prime Minister that statehood would eventually be restored.
No, I'm sure that if that statement has been made, it has been made earlier by Amit Shah ji on the floor of the Parliament as well, and we normally would like to believe that, and we believe in talks as a manner of resolution of a problem, and it is a huge problem. And to say the fact that the people of Kashmir have accepted abrogation of Article 370 and all is right for them, I would beg to differ from that. And like that, I would like to inform you that Article 370 is already sub judice at the moment. And I wouldn't comment on it. We have challenged it in the Honorable Supreme Court, and it's still an ongoing process. So I wouldn't like to comment on it. But yes, more important than that, there has to be restoration of dignity of our peoples of India, because Jammu and we may have locked them up, we may have put them behind bars for increasing amounts of time, but yet they are our own people. And I'm saying this after more than 2,000 workers of the National Conference have already given their blood into this game. Although we are sitting here comfortably and talking about all these parties being Indian, we have given out more than 2,000 people of our workers out there on the ground have already sacrificed their lives for this cause. Now, at the end of it, so therefore we are very, very concerned, and we want things. We want what an average Jammu Kashmir fellow perceives as his or her dignity should be restored in full. That's
Okay,
what
let
we
me just
want.
start.
And we want it constitutionally, we want it legally.
Fair enough. And you did point out that you,
and we are
and you did point. Okay, and you did point out that that abrogation is before the Supreme Court, the challenging of that abrogation. Ghulam Nabi Azad has come out and said that the Congress, and this is something we didn't talk about, whether this could be that midway formula, that the Congress has asked for the restoration of domicile rules, which means that without bringing back 370, you can control, like you do in many other states, who's allowed to for example, own land and many other sort of specific rights. That's among the demands made by the Congress. I need to start taking last comments. I'll start with you, Brigadier Gupta. Go ahead.
Resolved. The domicile issue has already been resolved. Land laws have also been promulgated. What Azad Saab made statement before going into the meeting was that it will ask for return of state subject. That I think is non-negotiable. State subject is linked to 370 and 35A. It cannot be restored.
Okay, I'm just telling you what Mr. Azad placed before the Prime Minister. I assume the Prime Minister will respond to that. Happymon, last thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's important to go back to 2019 very quickly. Three things happened in 2019. The bifurcation of the state, the deoperationalization of Article 370, and the undoing of the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir. Of the three things, the BJP has now offered one thing back, which is basically the statehood. And by having done that, I think BJP has emerged quite victoriously in this sort of in this political games happening in Jammu and Kashmir. Clearly, now BJP has an additional advantage here because you're also looking at the ongoing delimitation of the assembly seats in Jammu and Kashmir, which would give BJP an additional advantage. So I think whichever way you look at it, the mainstream political parties in Kashmir are perhaps at a grave disadvantage. The BJP is at an advantage. Now the big question really is, who is going to engage the separatists in Jammu and Kashmir, the Mirwaises, the many others? I mean, again, we can say that they are not important, but when you start the politics in Jammu and Kashmir, when you start elections, when people are allowed to come to the streets, things might change. So I think it is perhaps good for New Delhi to get into some sort of a back channel conversation with some of these dissident leaders in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah, I think you have said what I feel too, that the mainstream went in at a disadvantage. General Hasnain?
Barkha, there's one thing which I would definitely advise everyone. While we are talking about politics, we are looking at the political domain and emphasizing and focusing on it. Let's not take our eyes off the security environment, because these are situations which can always be reversed in a matter of one night. Exactly what happened with Pulwama, if you remember. This is something that we have to be very careful of. The second thing, we should ensure that whatever combination, coalition, anything which comes to power in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the union territory at the moment, subsequently the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the ability for the center and the state to work together. I think the thing which really compromised was the fact that over the years, whoever was at the center and whoever was at the state somehow could never see eye to eye and could never come into any kind of synchronization to carry out their development activities, the political activities, etc. And at the end of it, I would say Happymon Jacob Saab is quite right that with the delimitation process in place, there are advantages for the BJP, etc. But still, there is enough that democracy can offer in Jammu and Kashmir, and we should not forget that in a hurry.
Well, Tavleen was talking about how a little bit of Vajpayee in the Modi doctrine of Kashmir would have helped. The Prime Minister told the gathering that he wants to remove Dil Ki Duri as well as Dilli Ki Duri. So these are that's quite Vajpayee-esque, at least in words. The point is that there's a history of locking up these guys whom he said it to. But the ups and downs have happened with every government, with even when other parties were in power. So that's the big line from the Prime Minister. Dil ki duri bhi hatana chahte hain aur Dilli ki bhi duri hatana chahte hain. Tavleen, you want to comment on that?
I'm very happy to hear that. But, I was in Kashmir the last time about a few weeks before they did this Article 3, just after the election that brought him back to power. And the sense that I got from the people was that they want peace and they want the economy to boom and they just want to live their lives. They want jobs. They were desperate. And to tell you the truth, it was the first time that I saw almost more hostility towards Pakistan than towards India. But, I met politicians, quite senior politicians out of the Gupkar alliance, and they didn't believe that Article 370 was going to go at all. So they were taken by surprise. And I think that had they been taken on board, they'd have been much happier to go along with whatever, with this Dil Ki Duri business, or, they would have helped him reduce that Dil Ki Duri.
Yeah. Brigadier Gupta, Dilli Ki Duri or Dil Ki Duri is a very different rhetoric from Gupkar gang and ye traitors hai or ye Pakistani hai or go to Pakistan. The rhetoric seems to have shifted.
No, Barkha. The thing is, I seldom differ with my friend Datta. But now one thing, see, Dil Ki Duri and Dilli Ki Duri. Prime Minister is right. Before 2014, Delhi dur nahi tha. Delhi saath tha. They were hands in glove. And because they were hands in glove, they were looting the exchequer. There was no accountability at all. No closure reports. Till today, Tavleen ji, till today, many projects sanctioned in 2010, 2006, 2008.
I think can we unmute Tavleen? I think Tavleen is trying to react. Can we unmute Tavleen? Yeah,
No.
Tavleen.
I'm sorry, Brigadier Saab. That is nonsense. All right. There's been terrible mistakes made by Delhi, which is why we still haven't solved this problem. They were not hand in glove. And this stupid idea that you people have in the BJP that do parivaron ne loot liya, it's all bakwas. Okay? There was always mistakes made by Delhi. The denial of democracy for decades. In 86, when Rajiv Gandhi could have just ordered an election and Farooq would have been voted back to power, we wouldn't be here today. There's never been hand in glove, my friend, not at all.
Okay, let Brigadier Gupta respond. Yeah, go ahead, Brigadier Gupta.
Tavleen ji, I respect you, so I pardon the language you have used. I can also use that language. I will not, because I'm quite civil. Now, let me tell you, when I say hands in glove, I'm talking of accountability. There was no accountability in Kashmir at all. Okay. Even today, the exchequer has been looted. You don't agree, but there are documentary evidence. There are cases going on in the court. What is the JKC scam?
Okay, hang on. Sir, we're going in another. Let's get to the big picture.
I don't want to divert the discussion.
अब हम बिल्कुल local politics में घुस गए हैं. Let's just come back to the Dil Ki Duri and the Dilli Ki Duri and what we read from that. I'll take a round of final comments on that. Sameer, I'll start with you. You said a hammer doesn't always work. The Prime Minister seems to be trying a different approach. Sameer, last thoughts? Sameer.
Well, although I personally believe that hammers almost never work, particularly in terms of with human beings who have got evolved cerebral systems, usually talks work and sorting out over the tables work, and that's how the civilization has progressed. And using hammers and locking up people is a little bit of a reversal.
Okay, Sameer, we've lost you.
People might vouch for it, but I don't, and we didn't as a party. But the other thing is that we really sincerely hope that maybe later, if not sooner, good sense may have dawned on everybody involved, all the stakeholders, to take things more seriously and understand the price of whatever they have and try and maintain it and restore love and dignity for each other in this country, the social fabric across the states. And I think that's what we
Okay.
all want to work for. That's the
All
essence
right.
of national conference, and we vouch for it.
Okay, Ghulam Nabi Azad said that all parties told the Prime Minister that Article 370 is before the Supreme Court and we will wait for the Supreme Court verdict. So to me that, so while saying they want the restoration, I think that ball has shifted quite clearly to the courts. Very quickly, General Hasnain, wrap this up for us.
I would, Barkha, I would agree partially with my friend Anil, simply for the reason that over the years, in my experience, I've hardly seen a synchronization of activities taking place in Jammu and Kashmir between Delhi and Srinagar. There's always been some kind of a lack of any kind of a coordination there. Sometimes you found Delhi just leaving things to Srinagar to continue functioning the way it wanted to. For example, the entire separatist narrative dealing with separatists. There was never any seriousness of how to, if you have to engage, then engage seriously, or just leaving it in a limbo. Now, that is the kind of situation we don't want it to return here. We want that after restoration of full democracy here, when you find a state assembly, when you find a government in place, we want the government and we want the central government to be working together, completely together. That is the way forward as far as J&K is concerned.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. I suspect that the parties will also confer among themselves, at least the Gupkar alliance. The Prime Minister did speak about corruption-free governance. So, Brigadier Gupta, there was a reference to that. I'm sorry, I'm just reading out the details as they're coming, and said that that would inspire trust among the people and so on. But I think the line that will stay is the Dilli Ki Duri and the Dilli Ki Duri. That's going to be the quotable quote of today, and we'll wait to see how the Gupkar alliance responds to that. Has it moved on beyond the scars of the prolonged period of detention? Does it even have a choice? There are all the external factors, whether we like them or not, whether we think it's Pakistan's business or not. What's happening in Afghanistan is definitely something we need to be paying close attention to. And General Hasnain reminds us that in a COVID distracted world, there is an improvement in the security situation, but how long? How long does that hold? We don't know. We've all seen Kashmir long enough to know that things go up and down on a dime. Leaving it there, we maybe will bring you all back once we have more. Tavleen, General Hasnain, Brigadier Gupta, Dr. Kaul. Thank you. We're sorry. I don't know what happened to Suhail Bukhari. Apparently, we lost the line to him, but there'll be lots more to discuss in the next few days. So looking forward to more programs. Thanks to our audience as we continue our travels across India. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.